Hello everybody, welcome back. If you're new to the group, each week Molly and I present a word for reflection. The intention of this word is for it to be a guide in journaling, meditation, and discussion. And this week's word is reflections. And I really liked Molly's post, as I always do, about reflection and what it meant to her in 2003 and what it meant to her in 2021. And I think that difference, that growth, and that process for her is the really important part about the conversation this week. And at first, when you're looking at reflection, when you're new to this kind of a system or new to internal dialogue, new to trying to understand yourself, new to looking at your motivations and intentions, the important part of reflection is really taking a look at yourself, taking a look at your own behavior, taking a look at what drives you, how you're reacting, what irritates you, and then looking a little deeper. So oftentimes the things that bother you about other people are the very things that you're guilty of. So if you don't like it when people are rude, maybe there are occasions when you are rude. If you don't like it if people lie, maybe there are occasions when you're not fully truthful. So any of those negative attributes that you can find in somebody else, oftentimes a lot of that is a reflection of something that lives within you. So the first part of reflection is really understanding yourself, looking at those things that irritate you, taking a little bit of extra time to look at your own life, your own behavior, your own activities and attitudes on things, and seeing if there's some things that line up there. Are some of those things that annoy you things that you do? So once you realize some of those situations in your life, some of those behaviors in your life and annoying things in your life, then it's about taking that extra step. So the first step is, okay, sometimes I'm rude, right? Sometimes I'm snappy, or sometimes I get angry or lose my temper. And then watching yourself when you do that and really realizing that anger has a repercussion. So at first, the feeling oftentimes is, okay, like I lose my temper sometimes, but I like that. I like that it puts people on a little bit of edge. It demands respect. It instills this feeling of wanting to do what I say or listen to me. There's some positive things that I think happen when people are a little bit on edge around me. It helps me control my environment, right? So the same thing with other personalities. So if I'm a little more if I communicate in a really emotional way, and sometimes I play a victim, if I look at that, I notice that oftentimes in a lot of situations, that creates a situation where I might get my way. Somebody might feel bad or look at me and say like, oh, I'm going to help that person out, or oh, I'm going to let them have what they want. And that might benefit me, right? So it's not necessarily a good behavior, but it might benefit me. So as you look at that, as those lessons start to unfold in front of you, that's what Molly was talking about in that transition from really reflecting and looking in on yourself into reflecting back on what's happened to you in your life. So if you look at those situations, when you have some of those bad behaviors coming out that really benefit you, and you see that eventually there's negative things that start to happen around that. Oh, I gave this person this wrong understanding, so they kind of pity me, but it wasn't really appropriate. Maybe I villainize the people in my life and they look at those people and see a villain when that's not necessarily the case. Maybe the people in my life are actually wonderful and have just been misunderstood because of my portrayal. Or maybe the people in my life are on eggshells when I'm around and I thought it was great because I had a lot of control over my environment, but those people weren't happy in my life. There was a lot of uncomfortable feelings and things going on, and eventually you might lose friends, family, spouses, because they don't want to be around that, right? So no matter what your situation is, and each personality is going to have a different trait that really is dominant in their life, that they use in their life really naturally, that might lead to some initially beneficial things that they like, but eventually leads to some negative outcomes. So when you look back at your life, as you start to watch these things, start to pay attention to these reflections, look at the lessons that come about because of them, and then change your behavior going forward. Because that's really the key. If you're reflecting and looking back, that's wonderful. There can be a lot of lessons in that. There can be a lot of growth in that. But until you take those reflections, look at them a little closer, and really take the time to say, okay, so next time I'm in this situation, instead of losing my temper or playing the victim or being too cautious or not reacting or not having an opinion, maybe next time, or being too emotional or losing my emotional control, maybe next time I'm going to pause, I'm going to wait, and I'm going to try something different. And that process for me has been like a pausing, a saying, okay, here's what I want to say. Thank you, brain, for that option of something to say. I'm not going to take that option this time. I'm going to try something totally different. I'm going to say something that I wouldn't normally say. I'm going to react in a way that I wouldn't normally react, and see what happens. That's the really interesting part for me. So when I started pausing and stopping and saying, okay, my reaction would have normally been this, instead I'm going to do this totally different thing. I'm going to say something totally different, and I'm going to just see what the reaction is on the other side. And it was really shocking how different my relationships were becoming, how much I was growing as a person, how much less personally I was taking things, because it wasn't coming from this auto response place in me, and how much growth there was there in that process. So I think that's kind of the key to reflections. I think if you're looking at your behavior, that's the beginning phases of it. As you get better at looking at that, look at what happens when you do those things over and over again, how that affects your relationships, kind of the long-term lessons, and then use that to say, okay, I don't want to do that. I don't want to live that same life with those same negative things happening to me. Maybe I've had a divorce, or I've lost friends, or some negative things have happened to me. I've lost relationships with family, or I've lost a job. I don't want to relearn that lesson over and over again. Maybe next time I need to do something different. And that process really is how we learn and grow and become better in our futures. And it leads to a more grounded, centered feeling inside of yourself. And I really like that. I really like that longevity of this conversation about reflection, because it's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that you take a look at yourself, you realize some things, and then it's over. It really takes years to practice those things, to change, to watch those behaviors, to figure out your shortcomings, to see how they impact your life, to make decisions, to make take different actions, say different things, watch those differences, and really see what works for you, what has the best outcome for you, what brings you the most comfort and joy in your life. And even at that phase, there's more growth even there. So I know that sometimes when people come to that discovery of something, or they come to these epiphanies and they want to share it with people, sometimes even that process can come across as like a know-it-all feeling, or somebody thinks that they've like found the light and everyone else needs to kind of follow, or they have a lot of opinions about how you should do things, or opinions about how you should see things. And I think the important thing to remember is that it's a journey for all of us. It's really different for all of us. So each of these personalities go through that process really differently. So what works for me might not work for you, but the important part is reflection into yourself. So looking at how you're being perceived in the world, how you're behaving in the world, what those decisions are doing to your life, looking at those processes and bringing them forward, and trying to make changes, trying to do things differently, trying to try something else out, and then moving forward and seeing how that affects your life and how that impacts your life. And that will build a process of having a lot of courage, a lot of self-esteem, a lot of comfort, a lot of peace internally, because you'll get to a place where you really understand yourself, you really understand the people in your life, and you don't take things so personally. You don't have so much of that confusion and misunderstanding and personal angst from dealing with people on a regular basis in your life, and even out in public with strangers. So that process can be really beautiful, and it's always important to remember that no matter where you are, you always have an opportunity to continue to grow and change and develop. And the most important thing is to be kind to yourself, be kind to the people around you. Remember that it's hard. It's hard to go through these transitions. Other people are struggling with things, and it's hard to go through whatever they're going through. And really being open and kind to the people in your life is probably the key to all of it, because everything that you're learning and doing and growing through is challenging, and all those feelings that you're having are true to you. And that process is a lifelong process. So I'm so happy to have this conversation this week. I really like the word reflections. I really like the comments and the post that Molly made about that word, and I would really love to hear your comments on it. So thank you for showing up this week.